Summer 1943. Camp, Crossville, Tennessee. The brown, bubbling liquid inside the bottle mesmerized the German soldier, who had never seen anything like it. After 2 years of fighting in North Africa, surviving on hard biscuits and ersatz coffee, this sweet, carbonated drink called Coca-Cola seemed like an impossibility made real. It cost 5 cents at the camp canteen, the same price, the guards explained, that American children paid with their weekly allowance. That summer, across American prisoner-of-war camps, 371,683 German captives would confront a reality that contradicted everything Nazi propaganda had told them about American weakness. They discovered a nation where ice cream was an everyday dessert, where soft drinks were a common beverage, and where chocolate bars were so plentiful that guards gave them away. These simple foods, treats most German children had never even tasted, would dismantle Nazi ideology more effectively than any propaganda campaign. The mathematics of abundance were written in sugar and carbonation, in chocolate and ice cream, revealing an American industrial capacity that rendered German deprivation not a noble sacrifice, but an unnecessary suffering. What began as astonishment at America's sweets would evolve into a complete psychological transformation. The end of the desert. The surrender in Tunisia in May 1943 brought roughly 250,000 German and Italian soldiers into Allied captivity. These seasoned veterans of the Desert War, who had once pushed the British back to Egypt under Rommel's command, expected harsh treatment as prisoners. Nazi propaganda had prepared them for American brutality and starvation. Instead, within hours of surrendering, they encountered K-rations. These U.S. Army field meals, often the subject of complaints among American troops, contained unexpected treasures: crackers, processed cheese, candy, fruit bars, instant coffee, sugar tablets, and cigarettes. For German soldiers who had survived for months on meager rations, these emergency meals were feasts. Military records show that in the North African processing camps, the U.S. Army served pancakes with syrup, fresh eggs, and milk, foods that had vanished from German military rations years earlier. Feeding the enemy with superior quality food began immediately, though the psychological effect would only be understood later. A German officer later testified before the International Red Cross. "We expected to starve as prisoners. Instead, the Americans fed us better than our own army ever did. That confusion about America's resources was the beginning of our education." Across the ocean. A lesson in abundance. The Liberty ships that carried prisoners of war across the Atlantic in the summer of 1943 became floating classrooms of American abundance. Produced at an unprecedented pace, one completed every 42 hours at the height of wartime production, these vessels transported up to 30,000 German prisoners to the United States each month. Naval records show that prisoner rations aboard these ships equaled or even exceeded those of the crew, roughly 3,500 calories per day, including fresh bread, meat, vegetables, and coffee with sugar and milk. The ship's refrigeration systems, standard equipment on American vessels, kept food fresh for the entire journey. Most astonishingly, documented accounts confirm that ice cream was served on multiple Atlantic crossings. The July 1943 logbook of the USS General M.B. Stewart records ice cream being made and served to prisoners on July 4th, 10 gallons at a time. For men who had not seen ice cream since before the war, this frozen dessert in the middle of the ocean defied all understanding. First, impressions of America. When the ships docked at ports such as Norfolk and Newport News, the German prisoners encountered an America that Nazi propaganda had declared impossible. The Norfolk Naval Base alone, sprawling across 1,700 hectares, handled more cargo daily than Germany's major ports managed in a week. In the portside shops, canteens for dock workers, prisoners saw shelves overflowing with chocolate bars from Hershey, Mars, and Nestlé. Military procurement records from 1943 reveal that these stores offered dozens of candy varieties, sold at standard prices, 5 cents a bar. the same price charged everywhere in America. Their train journeys inland continued the lesson. Unlike the cattle cars used for prisoner transport in Europe, the Germans traveled in passenger coaches. Dining cars served full meals. Menus from July 1943 listed fried chicken, vegetables, pie, and coffee. To their astonishment, they learned that this was not a special favor for prisoners but simply standard American rail service. Life inside the camps. The vast network of POW camps across the United States housed prisoners under conditions that exceeded the Geneva Convention requirements. Camp Crossville, Tennessee, typical of the larger facilities, offered electric lighting, hot water, flush toilets, and heated barracks. But it was the camp canteens that left the deepest impression. According to Army quartermaster records, camp stores offered multiple brands of soft drinks: Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, along with chocolate bars, candies, ice cream where refrigeration allowed, cigarettes, fresh fruit, and even 3.2% beer. Prisoners earned 80 cents per day for their labor, later raised to $1. With chocolate bars and Coca-Cola priced at 5 cents each, a single day's pay could buy 16 items, an unimaginable luxury for Germans, where such products, if available at all, required special connections. Coca-Cola quickly became a symbol of American industrial democracy, the symbol of Coca-Cola. During the war, the Coca-Cola Company reached record levels of production. Company archives show that in 1943 alone, 5 billion bottles were produced under military contract, guaranteeing the beverage to all U.S. troops worldwide at the fixed price of 5 cents, a commitment that demanded extraordinary logistical coordination. German prisoners soon discovered that this once unknown drink was ubiquitous across America. Every camp received regular deliveries. Work detachments saw vending machines and coolers everywhere, at gas stations, factories, schools. Americans of every age and class drank it casually, often leaving half-empty bottles behind without a thought. Technically minded prisoners were amazed by the standardization. Coca-Cola tasted identical in Maine and in Texas, a feat of quality control unmatched by German industry. The syrup concentrate, produced in Atlanta and distributed nationwide to bottling plants, represented a level of industrial coordination that shattered Nazi assumptions about American chaos. Historical records from Coca-Cola DS archives confirmed that many POW camps received weekly shipments of 200 to 300 cases, each containing 24 bottles. At Camp Hearn, Texas, alone, prisoners consumed roughly 7,000 bottles per week during the summer of 1943. The miracle of ice cream in the American POW camps seemed like pure fantasy to the Germans, who had not seen it since before the war. Yet, U.S. Army records confirm that ice cream was regularly served in camps with adequate refrigeration during the summer months. The U.S. military considered ice cream essential to morale, so much so that special ice cream barges were built for the Pacific Fleet. At Camp Shelby, Mississippi, the 4th of July celebration in 1943 featured ice cream made on site. Prisoners watched as hand-cranked freezers turned ice, salt, cream, sugar, and flavorings into gallons of frozen dessert. The casual use of scarce resources, ice in July, cream and sugar, for something as frivolous as dessert baffled the Germans. By 1944, many camps had electric ice cream machines, offering flavors like chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, and butter pecan, surpassing even the selection in pre-war German ice cream parlors. Prisoners could buy ice cream bars or sandwiches for 10 cents, or cups in multiple flavors. Quartermaster records show that large camps ordered between 190 and 380 liters of ice cream weekly during summer. For the men who had once marched across the Sahara, this frozen abundance was nothing short of a revelation. The sweet education, sugar, chocolate, and the psychological transformation. The consumption of sugar in the American prisoner of war camps had a particularly powerful effect. In Germany, sugar was strictly rationed, civilians received about 280 grams per month when it was available at all. In American camps, bowls of sugar sat openly on the dining tables for unrestricted use. Quartermaster records from 1943 to 1945 show that the camps received 90-pound sacks of refined sugar each week. The camp bakeries used it liberally. Cakes, cookies, and pies appeared regularly on menus. Coffee, tea, cereals, and desserts were sweetened without limitation. One documented incident at Camp Aliceville, Alabama, in August 1943 illustrates the cultural shock. Humid weather hardened several hundred pounds of sugar, making it difficult to use. Instead of salvaging it with steam, as German cooks would have done, the American kitchen staff simply threw it away and ordered replacements. German prisoners working in the kitchen were reportedly distraught at the waste. The democratic abundance of American chocolate production revealed another kind of abundance, one both industrial and democratic. Major manufacturers, Hershey, Mars, and Nestlé, produced millions of chocolate bars each month despite wartime restrictions. The U.S. Army alone purchased 177 million kilograms of chocolate products during the war years. Canteens in POW camps offered several varieties: the standard Hershey bar, D rations, emergency bars, and other flavored chocolates, all priced between 5 and 10 cents. Prisoners soon noticed that Americans had personal preferences among chocolate brands, casually choosing one over another, something unimaginable in Germany where such goods barely existed. Red Cross parcels distributed monthly to prisoners included chocolate bars among other luxuries. According to records from the American Red Cross, the standard package contained chocolate, instant coffee, processed cheese, crackers, canned meat, cigarettes, and soap. These items supplemented regular rations and offered luxuries far beyond what German civilians received under rationing. A feast called Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving Day in 1943 introduced German prisoners to the full scale of American holiday abundance. This uniquely American celebration displayed a nationwide coordination of consumption that surpassed anything in wartime Europe. Army records confirm that every POW camp served a traditional Thanksgiving dinner: roasted turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes with gravy, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, vegetables, pumpkin pie, coffee, and milk. The logistics of providing turkey dinners for 425,000 people, alongside millions of American servicemen worldwide, demonstrated an organizational capacity that astonished the prisoners. That the German captives received the same meal as U.S. soldiers underscored a fundamental American principle: equality of treatment. It stood in direct contradiction to the racial hierarchy the Nazis had preached. Christmas kindness. Christmas of 1943 brought another revelation, not from the military, but from the American public. Religious groups, civic organizations, and private citizens sent packages to German prisoners of war. The American Friends Service Committee alone distributed 50,000 Christmas parcels to enemy prisoners. These packages often contained homemade cookies, candy, toiletries, games, books, cigarettes, and writing materials. Local communities near the camps added their own gifts. In Tonkawa, Oklahoma, townspeople brought homemade sweets to the German prisoners. In Hearne, Texas, church groups delivered Christmas cookies and candy. This spontaneous civilian kindness toward the enemy shook the foundations of Nazi ideology. Americans with relatives fighting in Europe nonetheless showed charity toward captured Germans, demonstrating strength through mercy rather than revenge. Work and witness. As America's labor shortage grew, German POWs increasingly worked outside the camps, witnessing firsthand the vast machinery of American food production. By 1944, around 100,000 prisoners were employed in agriculture and food processing, gaining an intimate understanding of the nation's abundance. In Michigan orchards, prisoners picked cherries destined for maraschino production, the bright red garnish adorning American ice cream sundaes. The sheer volume astonished them. A single orchard could produce tons of fruit purely for decoration. In canneries, they watched quality inspectors reject perfectly edible fruit for minor blemishes. Del Monte's 1944 records show that about 15% of fruit was discarded for size or cosmetic reasons, usually repurposed as animal feed. In Colorado and Nebraska, prisoners working in sugar beet processing saw a level of mechanization far beyond Germany's. Individual farms produced more sugar beets than entire German regions. They learned that America's annual sugar output, roughly 7 million tons from cane and beet, explained the unending sweetness they witnessed. Children of abundance. Prisoners assigned to work near American schools observed early versions of the organized school lunch programs. Children received hot lunches that included milk, protein, and vegetables. The National School Lunch Act would not be passed until 1946, but its wartime precursors already operated during the conflict. The daily milk program especially impressed the German observers. Many schools provided fresh milk to children every day, and some cafeterias even offered ice cream for a few extra cents. The idea that children could buy frozen desserts at school, while German youth faced hunger, left a deep and lasting impression. A taste of democracy. Low-security prisoners who occasionally ate in American restaurants under guard encountered a vision of democratic abundance. These modest diners offered menus that in Germany would have belonged to elite establishments, yet here they were available to anyone with a few coins. Prices recorded in 1944 show hamburgers for 25 cents, Coca-Cola for 5, slices of pie for 15, ice cream sundaes for 25, and full dinners for 65 to 75 cents. Service equality was striking. A factory worker and a bank president could sit side by side at the counter, order the same meal, and pay the same price. This everyday equality contradicted the rigid social stratification the prisoners had been taught to admire. Post-war legacy. Returning with the knowledge of abundance. By late 1944, German prisoners of war in the United States were no longer just recipients of abundance. They became its distributors. With their camp wages, they purchased American goods to send home: chocolate bars, instant coffee, canned food. International Red Cross records confirm this remarkable flow. German POWs sent approximately 11 million parcels to relatives in Germany, most containing food. The impact on families facing scarcity back home was profound. Receiving the bounty of America from imprisoned relatives while confronting famine firsthand undermined Nazi ideology at its core. Rationing and revelation. Wartime rationing in the U.S. revealed the stark contrast between societies. Americans grumbled about their sugar ration, 2 portions per month per person, but this was more than 3 times the German civilian allowance when it was even available. Meat rationing, at 28 ounces per week per person, far exceeded what Germans received monthly. Even under rationing, Americans maintained consumption levels Germans could only dream of. Records from the Office of Price Administration show that Americans consumed 74 pounds of sugar per capita in 1944, despite rationing, 10 times German levels. Beyond Coca-Cola, prisoners witnessed the full scale of the American soft drink industry. Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, Orange Crush, and numerous regional brands competed nationally. Multiple producers offering similar products demonstrated the impossibility of market abundance under Germany's controlled economy. Bottling plants operated in every major city, using standardized, efficient technology for carbonation, bottling, capping, and labeling. Distribution networks reached even small towns, gas stations, and grocery stores. By war's end, U.S. soft drink production totaled billions of bottles annually, dozens per citizen, outproducing entire German consumer sectors. Spring 1945, the final blow. The spring of 1945 delivered the final ideological shock. As U.S. forces advanced into Germany, German security police in America watched newsreels of soldiers distributing chocolate and gum to German children. The joy of these children, receiving treats their government could not provide, completed the destruction of Nazi myths. American soldiers entering enemy territory carried enough candy to give away, while the German state promised victory yet delivered starvation. Liberation footage from concentration camps showed U.S. troops sharing rations with emaciated survivors, demonstrating humanity toward victims of the regime that German soldiers had served. Returning home. Ambassadors of abundance. Between 1945 and 1946, German security police returned to a devastated homeland. Many prisoners had gained weight and recovered in health, while their families suffered under hunger. Medical examinations showed returning prisoners generally healthier than when captured, carrying with them first-hand knowledge of American abundance. They brought home the last Red Cross parcels, chocolate, coffee, and canned goods, treasures for families whose children had forgotten the taste of chocolate. Former POWs often became unexpected advocates for the Marshall Plan. They had witnessed American prosperity based on production, not conquest, and testified to its generosity. From captivity to reconstruction. The Americans. Ability to feed enemies while fighting a global war demonstrated that true power lay in productivity, not exploitation. These men understood that U.S. society could afford to waste food while still winning a war. This mentality, creating rather than conquering, shaped West Germany's post-war economic approach. The economic miracle of the 1950s drew in part on lessons learned in U.S. POW camps. Ex-prisoners applied first-hand knowledge of production methods, distribution systems, and consumer abundance to reconstruction. They had seen mass production make luxuries affordable, standardization ensure quality, and widespread consumption stabilize society. Industrial democracy could surpass authoritarian control. Cultural legacy and multi-generational impact. The lessons of U.S. abundance extended beyond the former prisoners themselves. Their children grew up hearing about the wealth of American camps. Initially fantastical, these stories proved true as West Germany recovered and American products arrived. Supermarkets, soda fountains, and candy aisles became realities mirroring those the prisoners had witnessed. Many former POWs studied or worked in the United States, drawn by the abundance their parents described. The impact reached German business culture. The idea of widespread consumer abundance, quality standardization, and democratic markets influenced the Wirtschaftswunder. By the 1950s, McDonald's operated over 1,400 restaurants in Germany. Coca-Cola was ubiquitous. Ice cream became commonplace. The ultimate lesson. The transformation from scarcity to abundance, begun in U.S. POW camps, was complete. The historical lesson remained powerful. Ideological transformation through abundance, not deprivation. Kindness instead of cruelty. Demonstration rather than propaganda. German POWs who could not believe in ice cream and Coca-Cola became the ultimate witnesses to democracy's power, the capacity to create abundance that could be casually shared with enemies. The story of German POWs and American food abundance represents one of history's most unusual victories. A war won not by destruction, but by generosity. An ideology defeated by ice cream, a worldview reshaped by soft drinks. These men arrived believing in German superiority and American weakness. They left understanding that American strength came from a productive capacity so vast it could waste resources without concern. A society that could give Coca-Cola to prisoners for 5 cents possessed a power that exceeded military might. The ice cream sundae, with its layers of ice cream, syrup, whipped cream, nuts, and cherries, became a metaphor for American abundance. Each component alone surpassed German dreams. Together, it represented luxury made routine. Enemies could request seconds while German children starved. A total indictment of Nazi failure. Personal revelations. Former POWs often recalled moments of revelation. The first bubble of Coca-Cola, the first spoonful of ice cream, the first bite of a Hershey bar. These sensory experiences carried more power than any argument. They had tasted democracy, and it was sweet. The transformation was complete and irreversible. Men who had marched for the Third Reich returned as apostles of abundance, bearing the revolutionary message that prosperity came from freedom, not conquest. The secret weapon of the United States, they realized, was not military might, but the ability to serve ice cream to the enemy. In the end, the bottles of Coca-Cola and ice cream dishes served in American POW camps achieved what armies alone could not: the complete transformation of enemy hearts and minds. German POWs who could not believe in such abundance became its greatest witnesses, returning home with the knowledge that democracy tasted like chocolate and freedom bubbled like soda. History reminds us that sometimes the greatest victories are achieved not through destruction, but demonstration, not through taking, but giving, not through hate, but the simple act of serving ice cream to enemies on a hot summer day.